Okay, I guess we're going to start, 7 o'clock. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Brian Massey, if anybody doesn't know me. And we've got two great speakers today. They're going to be, I'll introduce them in a second, but I wanted to tell you a little story about the leg lamp that we have out there. You probably know the Lobbyists for Citizens. We're a community activist group that we go to a lot of meetings in Lake County, and we try to educate citizens in Lake County what is really happening in our community. And all of our topics, well, we started out with property taxes, but it runs the gamut. It's amazing how many things in the county really revolve around property taxes, though. The leg lamp story started with the Port Authority. Lake County Port Authority had a project, they called it the Better Flip. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to go into a Willowick bungalow that was built in 1950, and they wanted to spend some money to try to upgrade it so that the millennials could see what they really could do with a 1950 bungalow. They had their board pass a resolution stating that they're going to spend up to $150,000. Now the reason $150,000 is it's important because anything more than $150,000, then you have to go out to competitive bids. So they said, we'll set the ceiling at $150,000, therefore we don't have to go out to competitive bids. Well, the short story is that they're now at $299,000 in counting. And I said, that seems a little pricey for a Willowick bungalow when you could have torn the whole thing down. So what we've done is we've gone to the city of Willowick, we've gone to the county engineer where they provide the inspection and permits, and we found out that they were using some unregistered contractors. We also found out that they spent $77,000 fixing the basement. As when I posted that online, we've had people come back to us and says, I'm a contractor. They shut me down in Willowick because I was fixing an outlet and I didn't have a permit. And another guy said, well, I do basement work and that should not have cost any more than $27,000, $28,000. So we said, we've got a problem here. I kept talking to the commissioners. I kept posting article after article, but the commissioners wouldn't do anything about it. In fact, Jerry Serino jumped right on the bandwagon and he wrote, I think, 3 articles for the News Herald saying what a wonderful thing this Better Flip was. So I said to our group, we got to get somebody's attention. So I went to a commissioners meeting and I said, in order to get the taxpayers' money back for the $299, we think you should convert this house into a museum, just like they have down at the Christmas Story House in Cuyahoga County. So what we did was we went out and we bought a replica leg lamp, that leg lamp that's out there. And then we went out and we spent some money. We had professional cookies made. That's what those leg lamp cookies are. So I went to the commissioners meeting and I told them that, and I put that leg lamp right on the desk of the commissioners. And John Hamercheck thought it was funny. Ron Young, it was a definite maybe. He wasn't too sure. And Jerry Serino, he was looking around for Sheriff Dunlap, But what I have found in this community activism is that, you know what freedom really means? This ability to go after the public officials with truth. And then you don't care one bit what they say because they don't influence your life. Not at all. They may call me, and they have called me, loose cannon, a right-wing nut job. It doesn't bother. It does not faze me one bit because I'm telling the truth. Jerry Serino is going to ride this to the bottom. And he knows it.
Boil them out.
Easier said than done.
So that's what that postcard was. And what we did, we took that postcard and we give it to every elected official in the administration building. That was the auditor, it was the treasurer, anybody that we can find. We gave it to them. It's funny, I also gave it to the city, the mayor of the city of Wickliffe. I said, I want to sit down with some people, I want to go over the details. What we also did was we sent to the Ethics Commission, the Auditor's Office, Secretary of State on this one issue. So now what's going to happen, we got a letter back from the Auditor's Office, and they're going to take that up when they audit the Port Authority's books for 2018. So the Port Authority knows that we mean business. That's the story behind that. There was another incident with Mr. Serino. I heard of a meeting between the Visitors Bureau and the commissioners. And I said, I'm going to go to that meeting. So I'm sitting in the corner there. Jerry Serino walks in with John Hammercheck. And they said, Massey's here. Jerry Serino said, and Brian calls me out of the meeting. He said, Brian, it's not really a public meeting. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I said, you sure you want to go down this path? He said, yeah, okay. So as I'm walking out the door, his secretary said, well, Mr. Massey, you're leaving the meeting. I said, yes, I've been kicked out by Mr. Serino. Really? I said, oh yeah, you're going to be able to read about that on the website. So that website, we're approaching 100,000 views on that website. We're getting over 500 views a day. It's probably most of the politicians in Lake County that are looking at it. But we're continuing to tell the truth. We always corroborate. If I give my opinion or a comment, I spell it out. But I want them to know that we mean business. So when I met Brian Ames. Brian is from Portage County, and I met him at a Portage Tea Party meeting, and he was very kind in what he was saying. And he chimed in when he saw my my article on being kicked out of the meeting. He said, Brian, we should talk, because he's got some real life experience with the Open Meetings Act and the records requests. I asked Brian, I said, would you mind, talking to the people in Lake County? I think you've got a lot of things that you can teach us. I call him community activist, par excellence, because he has taken it to a different level, and I look forward to getting to that level that he's at. Right now, I'm still a rookie compared to what they're doing, with the law. We're also going to hear, first I'm going to hear from Warner Mendenhall. Warner is an attorney in Portage County, is that
my office is in Akron.
In Akron? Oh, okay. And he's going to talk to you about record requests, a little bit of the FOIA. So I've done enough talking. I will turn it over to Warner first. Thank you so much, Warner.
I'm going to pick up and go off track here totally, okay? I think one of the most important things you can do to hold local government accountable is to get a website up and publish on that website. My history in Akron, I started out as a city councilman, not as a lawyer. I got elected to city council. The law department was lying to me about what we could and couldn't do and the budgets and everything else. The mayor did everything he could to get me defeated, including redistricting me, which I ran in a new ward and won that ward. Then I did eventually get defeated. There's a lot of consequences to stepping up, and it's not always good politically when you're in a fight all the time. It doesn't always ring true. The people don't understand what the fights are about, in general. You guys do. You're going to support people who you see fighting, but you will be trashed if you step up and take the fight on. Now, I've been doing this a long time. I was elected at 29. I was not a lawyer. This was not my plan. But after they lied to me enough, I thought, well, I'm relatively intelligent. I'm going to go to law school. And I came out and immediately began suing cities. Akron was my first lawsuit. And the lawsuit in Akron was actually about a housing issue. What I found in going through, we have community development block grant funds, right? You guys know what those are?
Yes.
Federal money comes in the city and they're doing stuff with them. Well, I just started looking at what we were approving on council on community development block grant funds, and something struck me that we bought 12 houses for the same price. Each one was $19,500. These are junk houses, right? 19,000, and then when we tear them down, build a new house, all this, and the costs were way beyond what a private contractor could do. And then I thought, now why $19,500? So we went to the public records, and we looked at the public records, and it turned out there were 250 houses that had been bought for $19,500. And I'm like, no, this just doesn't make any sense. People sell houses for different prices. It shouldn't all be the same price, right? Then we went to the property records to see what the sales records show with the county. You know, so we have our CDBG money. That's all. Everything's going for $19,500. Then we go to sales records, and it turns out they're not really being sold for $19,500 on the property records. So they were buying the house for $2, $3, $5, but every single time the city was paying $19,500. What do you think was happening? Does anybody have any ideas?
Fraud, same house.
Well, it's fraud. Actually, we filed a fraud lawsuit. That's what we did. No, they were different houses. These were true houses, true properties. Any other ideas?
Gouging
What's that?
grants.
What?
They were gouging the block grants.
Yes.
Somebody's making big money out of it, that's what it is.
So anyway, we managed to get the HUD statements, and we managed to get some testimony from the people who actually sold the house for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, right? And there was a mismatch. And a HUD statement, many people may not know this, it actually is it's a tax filing. It's a 1099 tax filing. So all these people in poor neighborhoods who were selling their houses for a few grand were getting a HUD statement, and the HUD statement actually said $19,500. So they were being taxed on it. So the money that was being ripped out of the HUD program and landing on the floor somewhere, going into somebody's pocket, that was not being taxed properly. The 1099 was being issued to that person in that poor neighborhood with that junky house for $19,500.
But he didn't get 19.
Right, right. So it took us several years to sort of weasel our way through that and figure out what happened. And I think I have a slide on that case here as well. But that's why I got into law. Was actually initially was to fight City Hall, I wanted to pick up one thing on the auditor's statement, because, and I really am jumping around here, but the auditor's issue, and something we found with the city of Akron is, the auditors issue letters. They're not the auditor's findings. There's a finding packet, but there's also a guidance letter that comes as well. And if anybody wants to do public records requests of that, those are very interesting. So most people don't know about the guidance letter. They get the auditor's statement, no, there's this that's wrong and this needs fixed. But you look at those guidance letters, there's a ton of information in those guidance letters. Now, in Akron, I started asking for the audited statements, and I learned about the guidance letters, so I started asking for the guidance letters. And the auditor had found, now Akron's it was pretty big, it's shrinking all the time, but we found that the mayor had taken without any council authority or any council approval. The council has to tell the mayor what account to put the money in and how to spend it, right? The mayor was simply moving the money to whatever account he wanted to do. And we found in 1 year, $200 million was moved without council authorization between accounts.
And this is Mayor Pasquale?
Pasquale, yeah.
Whoa.
So, $200 million. So this is jaw-dropping stuff. And the auditor did, catch it, and it has been fixed. And one of the things that was found at that time is there were like 1,200 different bank accounts. They were all over the place. all these funds. So the auditor forced the city to get down to about 100 funds. The other issue with that is that federal funds have to be segregated. When you get a federal fund in, you're supposed to spend it on exactly that program. That was not happening. The federal funds are just floating between and among all the accounts. Now, this is actually very dangerous to our cities because there's something called the Federal False Claims Act, which I also do. If you take federal money, you have certified what you're doing with it. And you have certified how you're handling that money and how you're going to spend that money. And if you don't do it that way, you're liable under the Federal False Claims Act for 3 times the damage. And guess who pays that? You do. Not Pasquale in Akron, or, there was an issue in Cleveland. There was a False Claims Act case in Cleveland over that exact issue with the air quality funds. And who pays? The taxpayer pays, and they'll pay triple. Plus attorney fees, plus right now they charge an additional for each separate misrepresentation. It's up to $21,000 on top of whatever else is going on.
Why is it because Pasquale not in jail?
Well, he did resign.
They should seize his assets.
Why isn't Mike White in jail?
He should be too, yeah.
Right? I think that, I'm way off track now. What happens with our political leadership is the FBI is first of all, they got political power. They really use the political power. The U.S. attorneys are appointed by the president, right? So there's political power that is at play. And they use it to keep themselves safe. The other thing is, if it's a criminal charge, it's a jury. So you're going to come after a guy who's been in office at the time 23 years, has won election after election after election, has the entire power structure behind him, raises $300,000 a year for his election committee, right? And wins by generally good majorities. Well, where's the jury come from?
Yeah.
The pool that voted.
The pool that voted for him,
Yeah.
exactly. So they are very hesitant to bring a charge against a politician. So often you'll see them resign and sort of disappear. So Pasquale resigned and disappeared, and one of the ones that Mike White had a lot of issues in Cleveland. See, I guess I shouldn't defame him, but, and that's something else I want to talk about on websites, because, anyway, we've been there too. But a lot of times when there's an issue, a politician will simply resign and disappear. That's what that's about. With Pasquale, I know precisely what he did. I know that he broke the law. Okay? One of the things that we caught him in through public records requests, he took scholarship funds that he had in a nonprofit organization, and he spent them on a political campaign.
Oh,
Another thing that he did is he took the city credit cards. I'm obviously not afraid to talk about these things because I know it for a fact. Because we put it up on a website. We told people what he did. We showed all the credit card expenses using a city credit card so he and his girlfriend could fly to Greece. Now he's married, okay, but he and his girlfriend needed to go to Greece. And they rented Audis. And they stayed on an island with a developer. Okay? This is on the city credit card. We caught him on that, he repaid it. The crime had already been committed though, right? That's totally a misuse of public funds. The other thing that he did is that he had these big campaign accounts with lots of money in it. Every single day almost, he was out at the bar, at the restaurant, spending campaign funds. And guess where else he spent the campaign funds? Now, campaign funds are supposed to be spent on a campaign, right? There should be some connection with the campaign, right? Those cards were charged throughout Europe, China, Eastern Europe, Israel. They had mud baths in Israel, I know that. All over the place. There is no conceivable reason for some of that spending. None. Related to a campaign. Right? But nobody did anything, and we put this on the website. We had the credit card numbers, we had his campaign reports, we had all through public records, we had everything he did, put it all up there, and guess what? He got reelected. So, it's just very hard to punch through. It's very hard to punch the information through, but we can start. And the internet has given us, obviously, a way to talk directly to people. And I will say this, in the midst of all of that investigation in 2007, this mayor who'd run and won over and over, I did help a candidate out who came within 1,000 votes of defeating him, and he was outspent 10-1. It was about 300,000 to 30,000. So we came that close. And this was the dawn of Facebook. This was the dawn of, all these means of communication, and we did use them. I mean, it did give us a boost even then, but now I sort of wish that campaign had happened in this era. I think we would probably maybe been able to punch through. Anyway, so there's some stories.
At that time, did you get any help at all from newspapers, or were they as bad as they are today?
The newspaper is, first of all, we did investigate the newspaper. What we found with the newspaper, the Akron Beacon Journal, the crowning whatever of the neighborhood chain, the newspaper actually, in the old days, and I'm talking old days, the 80s, they had 220 reporters, they had investigative teams, they had everything going, right? And they actually did investigations. And in fact, that CDBG fund case, they did an investigation on that and did a great job. But now, the Beacon Journal has 50 reporters, maybe. So they're down to a quarter what they were. They actually shrunk the size of the paper, they increased the pictures, and they went color. So you see where they're headed. But investigating the paper, we found out a number of things. We found out that they absolutely had to have like 20% net profit every single year. And they would cut or do anything to get that 20% margin every single year. They were just raking in the money for years. And when newspapers started to drop, man, they just cut to maintain that margin. I don't know that they're maintaining that margin anymore because it's not a quality paper. Okay, so to maintain a margin, they should have stayed and tried to be a quality paper, maybe cut that margin down to grocery store levels of 2 or 3%. But 20% margin is what they had to maintain. The other thing we found out investigating the paper, and they will contest this, okay? Much of what I say will be contested, but their building is this massive building in downtown, and we looked at the property taxes that they were paying. Well, guess what? We didn't think they were paying the right amount of property taxes. They had that building, valued at a very low number, which I'm sure they wouldn't sell it to me for, but I'd be happy to buy it for that number, right? I mean, that's the test. Well, okay, if that's your valuation, sell it to me for that. You think your building's $1 million? Great, I'll buy it right now. But it's not. The building's $10, $15 million building. It's a huge, massive building right in the downtown. It's worth a lot of money. But those property taxes were kept low year after year after year after year. And who makes those decisions? Well, your auditor, your local auditor, your county government. In cahoots maybe with the city government, right? They're very thankful to pay very little taxes for their land. So why don't they investigate? Because all of a sudden their taxes could go up, their margins could get cut. It's their bottom line and their self-interest too. So
The truth doesn't mean anything anymore, really.
Well, no, of course it does. You're proving it. But the way to prove it, I'm glad you said that right then, because I wanted to get into that issue of defamation. Everything we did, we had a website called Change Akron Now. Everything we did, all we did, was put up the exact document we discovered. We highlighted it. We didn't even really editorialize about it. It speaks for itself.
Yeah.
This bending doesn't make sense. And there's lots of different tools to do that. We use Document Cloud. That had just come out back then. which allows you to highlight certain elements of the document. But there's lots of ways to do that. But put the documents up there. If you're going to editorialize, be very careful, because you will get hit with defamation lawsuits. Okay, I'll give you an example, and we built some new schools in Akron under that state program, and I had an employee of the electrical contractor blow the whistle, not on the electrical contractor, on the city. He called me up, he said, they're not inspecting our electrical work. And most electrical contractors you'd think would be, I don't know, they wouldn't call the city. But anyway, this is one of the employees, that's the problem. So guess what happens to him? What do you think happened?
Gets fired.
Gone. He's just telling the truth. He's just like, so he gets, he sues over that, and that's a whole thing. Well, he did a deposition, it was on the court docket. I put it on the website, and all it said is we were doing call-in inspections. Does anybody build? Anybody build houses or build? There's no such thing as a call-in inspection. You have to go and inspect. Oh yeah, that plugs in there, that wire looks right, right? You got to inspect. You can't call it in. Oh yeah, it's okay. Right? Call-in inspections. So, right, and he's complaining about the city. The city's the one that we actually, there's a whole bunch of story behind all that too, but we had a building department for a while, now we no longer have a building department. It's now moved to the county. But we had this building, they were doing call-in inspections, and the guy blew the whistle on the city and on the zoning, on the building inspectors. So I put that up on the web. And I said, there's call-in inspections. The city building inspectors aren't doing their job, right? I get sued by his employer for defaming that company. I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't mention your company name on anything on the web, but they alleged, and it worked out okay for me, but they alleged that, because I said that the inspections weren't done, because they were call-in inspections, that their company was, that we were defaming their company. Now, that's a stretch, but you know what? The courts because the courts again, Democratic judge, Democratic mayor, Democratic donor, the electrical company, that damn case dragged on and on and on. And even for me, who's a lawyer, whatever, and I got some resources, it's a pain in the ass. That's a legal term.
What's the Latin?
So, what we're doing, even putting as clean, and I actually do defamation. I've sued people in defamation. I've been sued now in defamation. We're very careful. I'm as careful as you can be. And yet, I still had to deal with a lawsuit, and it still cost me money, and it still took up about a year to get the thing out of court.
That's pretty quick.
Well, I
That's
do
quick.
know what I'm doing.
A year.
And that is pretty quick. But don't kid yourselves about what's going to happen, because they're going to come back. And one of the things that I've thought about in terms of this type of activity and activism is, sort of like the way Anonymous has done it. You do sort of need to have a group, so that and try to stay sort of leadership less and very horizontal with the group, because if one person stands up, boy, they're going to take them down. They're going to come at that one person who's seen as the leader. Okay, so act democratically if you can. I know it's tough. I just know running groups, it's hard. It's better to be an authoritarian and autocrat than to have a democracy. But a democracy, will help to protect a little bit. It's more resilient, because those leaders get nailed. All right? you know, they're gonna look at your taxes, they're gonna look at your property
So
taxes,
essentially-
your street's not gonna get plowed, your garbage may not get picked up someday. I mean, things happen, just all around the margins with you.
Just as good as
Okay.
anything else.
So that's just a cautionary thing. Anyway,
So if we continue to publish the records that we get, and as you say, highlight what you want.
highlight what you want people to pay attention to.
So how can they sue you over a records request that you're publishing online? They're gonna do it anyway, right? I mean, just
Yeah, they
to
just,
hassle.
yeah, they did it. All I published was a, deposition that was filed with the court that this is what this guy said. Right? That should have been, I mean, I got sued, we won the lawsuit, but, okay? It's not that you will win, the problem is you're gonna go through this process, it's very distracting and very bothersome to, your wife maybe, or your husband, or, you know what I'm saying?
Would it have been wiser during the litigation not, would it have been wiser not to reference something that could have brought on the litigation? Or if there is litigation, is it even wise to reference it during the course of the litigation?
I mean, I wouldn't have done anything different. I wouldn't do anything different today. I'd put it up there. It's a deposition, the guy's under oath, and that's what he said. And he wasn't
Okay.
even, listen, it's the electric contractor that sued me. It wasn't the city,
Yeah,
it's the contractor. Somehow created this theory that he was,
you scared him
damaged.
well.
So,
What's that?
You scared him a great deal.
right, so obviously they're trying intimidation. When the case was settled, did they have to pay you a fee for your attorney's fees, quote unquote, for that? Or was it just whitewashed or wash away and be done?
Everything walked away, everybody walked away.
Oh,
So it still cost you money, time, and bandwidth, and in the end, they kind of got what they wanted in the sense that you were distracted.
I have, yeah, and I will tell you, I probably could have pushed harder on my end, but I got other things to do.
Right.
I mean, if I wanted to, just make that my life, yeah, I could have probably extracted something from their side, but I got other things to do, I'm moving on. That isn't real important to me, that stupid defamation case, and I'm going to make a point about this stupid contractor who sued me. Who cares?
Right. How much did he sue you for?
Oh, I don't remember. I mean, some crazy. All right, go ahead.
Could I say something with that? I appreciate what you're telling us. I don't want people to get scared, because to me, this is war. And we're gonna take casualties, people are gonna get hurt, and we gotta be able to ante it up and suffer consequences, just move on. It's nothing, it's a glitch, it happens, and if we're gonna be in this fight, it's gonna happen to us. So let's just take it on and move on. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't want this to kind of hang over so somebody not to do something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You do need to get in a mindset. You can read about kind of a warrior mindset and what that is. If I don't expect everybody to do this, but first of all, I've been at this for a long time. I got elected to the Akron City Council in 1991. I haven't stopped since. So, in that entire time period, I probably engaged in, I don't know, I've had thousands of clients, hundreds of public interest related cases. We win some and we lose some. And honest to God, if we win a case, you know what I say to my guys? Next case, right? There's no time to go celebrate a whole lot. I mean, have a beer, enjoy the night, but back to work the next morning because we got another case to deal with. If you lose the case, same thing, next case. It's just simply what it is. You can't get on an emotion, and I know you do, okay? All I'm telling you is after 30 years, I'm off that emotional roller coaster to some extent. My roller coaster goes like this. When you first start out, it's like this, and that's exhausting. You cannot maintain if you're up and down all the time. You say, I'm going to do the fight, I'm gonna celebrate briefly my victories, I'm gonna mourn briefly my losses, but there's always the next day, and there's always the next battle. Because this is absolutely endless. Every single community we go into and investigate, we got problems. Every single one. And some are huge, some are deadly, and I'll actually show that one in a minute. But just be aware, there's always going to be something else. As you start digging, you're going to just see more and more and more. Just say, look, this, and we do evaluate our cases. We're pretty tough. When a guy comes in, like Brian did, I want to see what I believe to be a slam dunk. And I never tell my clients it's a slam dunk. I tell them how hard it's going to be and how difficult it's going to be. Because with that criteria, we win about half. I've been through a lot. I want to see a slam dunk, and we win about half. So, there's going to be that's the kind of mindset that you need to be in. The other thing, I'm going to talk about Brian here briefly, but he can tell his own story better than I can. And he is a rocket scientist, right? You all know that? But what Brian and I have talked about, and what he's actually implemented, is that it's very expensive to hire attorneys to do the cases. I'm happy to do the case, but I got to feed my family, I got to pay my guys, So, and Brian did hire me to do a case for him, and we did that case. But what we've tried to talk about is how we can set up models that other people can grab. Here's a set of facts. Draft your own damn complaint and go. This is how litigation goes. I think we'll get there eventually, but literally, and Brian thinks about this in a systems capacity. This is a system. It's a algorithm, essentially, so to speak. But, what we'd like to do eventually is have it so individuals know enough to actually go litigate these things. There's not enough attorneys to do it. And even if there is the attorney to do it, it is expensive for your average middle-class person. Okay? So what do you do? So we are trying to build these models, so people can take, here's how you do a public records request, here's how you draft a complaint, here's how you draft discovery, this is what you can expect, here's the timeline. Just start using that system. You're allowed to do it on your own.
Legal Zoom for activists.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I actually have a web domain that I like to get activated called howtofightcityhall.com.
Oh.
Just to try to get this out there, because just try to duplicate, because we've got a lot of research. You're welcome to it. You're welcome to every complaint we've ever drafted, every discovery setup we've ever done. Use it. There's no copyright. Use it. But understand how it works and what kind of arguments you have to do. And we could even put transcripts up, like on your trial, what we did in the trial. So you know roughly what kind of questions to ask, how to get through it. And you're not going to be at the level of a lawyer. Most people aren't anyway. Some people might be. Brian, I don't know. But if you have general patterns, these do fit patterns, so that we can start hammering our governments. They need to know we're paying attention. And hey, you have that public meeting in private with the developer, and it should have been, people should have been allowed in, and you go into executive session, you don't say why. Look, here's your complaint. Let's go, guys. So, and Brian's been very brave in what he's taken on there, and I'm not going to get much more into his story. Let me just flip through this thing real quick, because I'll shut up here in a sec. But let me flip through this thing real quick. I think there are a couple things I wanted to make sure I mention. Well, I just put a couple quotes up here. These are great quotes. You've got to have the information to make decisions. They hide the information all the time. This was a case that we did in the 2000s, early 2000s, the Kish case. We had a couple ladies. They came into my office and they said, "Hey, Warner, we didn't get paid overtime." you know, I was like, how much do they owe you? And they said, we think it's, you know, $1,000. You know, these are middle-class secretaries for the city. They knew me because I'd been down there. They just wanted a couple grand. The story's kind of funny because I called the law director. I said, Max, you know, Liz and Vicky came to see me. They didn't get their overtime. Could you look into it? I'd like to get their overtime. I think you owe them about $4,000 or $5,000. He gets back and he said, we're not paying them a thing. There's no, you know, we're not paying them a thing. We don't owe them overtime. And I said, Max, you know, we can get this done. Why do you want to fight me on this? So anyway, I say to Liz, you know, do you have evidence of your overtime? She says, yeah, I have a whole box of it. Because we filled out these forms, right? Well, the forms weren't a proper city record. They were never authorized. And they had all these forms of all these extra hours they had done. And they had the whole box of them. So I called Max up. I said, Max, you guys are in some trouble. You know, you've got this and that violation. I'd like to get this case settled. You know, but Liz and Vicky will take $5,000 right now and they'll go away. Turn this down. Get into litigation. We asked for discovery. Discovery is where you ask the other side for documents. Now, Liz had brought me all the documents. I thought, well, let's ask for those documents. They're public records. So I made a request for the documents. Guess who didn't have any documents at all? The city. They didn't have any records. All the records in my office had been destroyed by the city. All their overtime records had been destroyed. I had a box about this big. It wasn't just Liz and Vicky, okay? It was the whole department. It was the plans and permits department back to housing issues. So all of them had been destroyed. So I called Max up and I knew the law. At the time, we had a very good public records penalty. That's been changed by the state legislature. We need it back the way it was. But it used to be, at the time that we sued, it was $1,000 per record destroyed. So very stiff penalty. Now there's a cap on it and everything else. So it's very, you know, all you can get is really attorney fees, I think up to $5,000, and you know, it's ridiculous. So they've really weakened our public records law. But at the time, it wasn't weak, $1,000 per, and I had a box. I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, there's a lot of records in here. Right before trial, and I had counted out 800 destroyed records that related to my client. There were thousands of others related to other employees that had been destroyed. They weren't part of the lawsuit, though. And I called Max. I said, Max, you guys are going to be on the hook for $800,000. I said, I'll offer to sell this case right now for $200,000. Right? Great day. Great day for the secretaries. Great day for me. Nope, wouldn't settle it. So we go to trial. And the jury finds out that all the records were destroyed, and they give us a verdict for the $800,000.
Wow.
And then, on top of it, there's something called spoliation. Has anybody heard of spoliation?
No.
Spoliation is where you do something to gain an advantage in litigation. That's, you know, and you destroy evidence. So destruction of records is one thing, destruction of evidence is another.
Sound like Hillary.
The court, I'm not going to get political here. Okay? The court also awarded us $800,000 for the spoliation.
So did the city appeal?
Yes, they did. And,
Yeah.
and I, you know, and this is how long these lawsuits go. 6 years later, we ended up settling with them for $983,000. After we had to go through and win all those appeals. So what was I saying about time issues? You just sort of, yeah, I mean, you just have to keep going and keep fighting, because God knows, it takes forever on some of these cases. That CDBG fund case, I think, took 3 years. This one took 7, start to finish, you know. But it sets some good law. You can see this here. And I you know, for what it's worth, if anybody wanted the PowerPoint, I can send it up to them. And here's, 1.7, we had some attorney fees in there too. So 1.7 million was the total.
Some attorneys.
Yeah.
It would have been better off settling with you.
What's that?
It would have been off paying $200,000.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean,
course,
I always
always.
give, yeah. The way I practice, I try to get them in a box, and then I call them, and we're reasonable unless you want to go to trial.
So can you speculate why they didn't take that initial settlement?
Yeah.
The mayor was Don Plisquellic. He told his law department they're never settling.
It's not his money, that's why it's our money.
He was never settling any cases with me. But he, I mean, eventually did, but, yeah, I was gonna have it.
Was he still in there after the 7 years that transpired?
Yeah, he was there through the whole thing, yeah.
What court were you in?
Federal district court. We had the Ohio Public Records case that was ancillary to a Fair Labor Standards Act case. We brought it into federal court because they didn't pay these people their overtime.
Were you down in Akron or up here?
Akron. This is how I use public records: employment, whistleblower cases, eminent domain cases. We get all the information from ODOT if they're taking the property, see what their plans are, see what they're doing. Basically, yeah, any case that intersects with a public entity, you know, if we're dealing with nursing homes, schools, you can get going into FOIA a little bit, and let me make sure this is clear to you. Ohio, it's a public records request, right? A public records request. Talk about it that way. Those are the words you need to use in your letter. That's how you do it. Federally, it's a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request. So they're actually very different, whole different set of rules for how these are managed. But FOIA is very good as well for getting from the federal government, HUD, the CDBG records, you know, bringing in stuff. And the federal government a lot of times is very responsive, sometimes not. I'm not going to go too much into the, you know, the process here. You can go into a little bit, whatever you want to do. But, you know, we have the yellow book. I used to call it the yellow book. Is it still called that? Yeah. Get the yellow book. If you got a meetings issue or public records, it's pretty good. Not everything's in there, but it's pretty good. And read that yellow book, know what you're doing. That gives you a basis. We'll try to get howtofightcityhall.com going so you've got some models for what to do. You can file directly with the Supreme Court, so you can get an opinion directly from them. So that's one way to go. I've started to do that a little bit more because, you know, at the Common Pleas Court, you find it out at trial, then you have an appeal, and then the Supreme Court doesn't always have to take that appeal. If you start at you can start at the appellate court, or you can sometimes start at the Supreme Court for some of these cases. The public meetings cases, you've got to start at the Common Pleas Court because they've got to flesh out the evidence, you'll have a trial, you know, witnesses, you know, that's why it has to start at that level. But public records, you can jump right to the Supreme Court. Yeah. I like to have, you can make a request verbally, you don't have, you know, but I like to make sure that it's in writing. Hand delivery, certified mail, that helps you enforce your public records. The retention policies, that's also really important too. Make sure you know what your government's retention policies are. They have every government has a retention policy, and it's on file with the Ohio Historical Society down in Columbus. They have to, if they're ever going to destroy any record, they have to pass a retention policy. It has to be approved by the Ohio Historical Society. So that's where those retention, you just make a request from them, they'll get it right to you. I wanted to talk about a couple of cases real quick. I'm sorry, are we okay, time-wise?
Well, Brian's got, I don't know how much Brian's got, but...
He's got a lot, but...
Okay.
What time are we supposed to be out of here?
8:30-ish, 8:45.
42 minutes.
I'm going to wrap up real quick. The Clinton case was Cleveland Metro Hospital. We were trying to get records on the air handling system. They had an animal incineration unit, and the flues had busted. And the NICU was right there, and it was putting smoke from animals that were involved in experiments ranging from cancer to other debilitating diseases. It's going into the NICU unit and the path lab. And if you've seen recently, I got into the case in the mid-2000s, you know there were a lot of convictions. A lot of those convictions out of Cleveland Metro was around what was going on with their air handling system. And they were spending some crazy number. they were spending in the millions every year on their air handling system. It was just poisoning everybody. Canal Fulton, the only reason I'll mention it real quick, mayor leaves office, set a dumpster fire out back, was burning evidence. Joe Simperman, he went down on a public records investigation that we did. Does anybody know what happened to him? He's a Cleveland councilman.
Yeah.
He really was an up-and-comer.
Yeah.
We started. All we did was go into the city record and look at his votes and see if he voted for grants and money for his wife's not-for-profit. And we just matched them up and turned him in the FBI. Because he had done it, 30, 40 times. And it was $32 million total. So, and it's just a straight-up violation. It was right on the city record. It was all recorded. We matched him up, turned him to the FBI. Now, he ended up getting charged with I forget what he got charged with. I think they ended up charging him with a misdemeanor state ethics violation, which he resigned. But he landed on his feet. He got hired at a nonprofit for $100,000 a year.
He had that BS trans fat law too.
What's that?
He had that BS trans fat law, restaurants couldn't serve.
Trans fats, I don't know anything about that. This was a client of mine, Michelle Huth, and her dad went to a public meeting and they got loud and they got charged with menacing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So here's her acquitted. Here's her dad a few weeks later. We had his trial. I do criminal defense too, because we have so many criminals at these public meetings that need defended. So yeah, they charged both of them with menacing for getting loud at the meeting. And Bill Huth, you got to understand, is 78 years old, and his daughter's a lawyer. And so they, they knew what they were doing. And there was an executive session issue and everything else. So in the criminal trial, we actually set up and cross-examined them on issues that we needed for the public meetings lawsuit that came later. And Michelle sued them in federal court for violating her civil rights. It got about an $80,000 settlement there. And she also got, she won the public meetings lawsuit and got some attorney fees paid. This one is the young man on the cover of the Canton Repository here, Max. He was a pole vaulter, and his dad got a little out of hand at a public meeting because they were forcing his son, he was third in the state as a freshman. He's #1 in Stark County right now. He's a sophomore. They were forcing him to jump in the rain in his practices. And he said, I feel unsafe. I'm going up. He said he jumps pretty far, like 14 feet or some crazy number. And he's like, I'm worried about it, and I don't want to hurt myself. And I did hurt myself. And by the way, Coach, I don't want to do it. He went home and complained to his dad and said, look, they're forcing us to do this in the rain. The poles are wet. We're slipping. We're getting hurt. His dad went to the board meeting. His son was off the track team within a week.
Yeah.
So that was a more recent one, but that's, it's not just you, his dad, right? They retaliated against his son at Hoover High School. And this is one of the best kids in the state at the his age. Well, I put this one in here just to remind people that there are removal statutes. If you have a mayor you don't like, and you kind of need to have pretty good evidence he's done something criminal, 5 people can go to probate court and ask for a trial. Nobody knows
down
it.
in Florida.
What's that?
This is the one that got into trouble down in Florida?
No, this was the guy right before him.
Oh, okay.
They're tied together. Miglerini and Kupta are tied together. But Mayor Kupta had gotten a contractor had paved his walkway and done some other things for free. That's a crime. So some of the citizens got upset about it. And what I want to say about this is it's never used. We were like the 4th case in the last 50 years. And the problem with it never being used, this is sort of about taking the long view on things, courts don't even know how to handle it. There's no case law. And we actually, we got dismissed and we appealed, and then he resigned. So it was considered moot after that. He resigned after we brought the pressure. But these kind of cases need to be brought just so we can develop some case law. So if you have a solid crime, you can prove it, bring the case.
I'm from Geauga County, and we had an embezzlement there over an 8-year period of $1.8 million from the auditor's office. I have documentation that the prosecutor was told 23 times over a 2.5-year period that it was going on, and he did nothing.
Well, you need a website like this, and you know, you...
Can we do this removal statute on it?
No, it's just for mayors. Sorry.
So what's the mechanics on the mayors? Just kind of curious. I mean, so 5 citizens
They
complain.
swear out 5 affidavits, you have a draft of complaint, you do have to have an attorney on this is not...
Okay, yeah. And then does the probate judge oversee the trial?
Probate judge oversees the trial, and the law director for the city has the option, this is where it gets a little tricky, they have the option to try him, and if they refuse, then the citizens can hire a lawyer to try him.
Really?
You can see how that gets tricky.
Oh, wow.
Does
Right?
this work for city managers too or not?
No. Mayors.
It's just mayors.
I'm just trying to throw a few tools out here that are unused, okay?
Wow.
And do not try this on your own.
No, I was gonna say, that's just, I just never, that one shocked me. I didn't know it was this thing, and that law's been there for a long time.
For a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, if you look at the code, there's a lot of interesting things in the code, and a lot of it goes unused just because people don't know. So we need to put that up on Hotbed City Hall too.
Yeah.
This last one, Armstrong, Rod was on the Stowe School Board. You know, they've been having some problems. Some people may know that. Stowe's in Summit County, but he's on the school board. He's a retired accountant for Ford Motor Company. And they wouldn't give him the financial records. They wouldn't give him, he was an auditor accountant for Ford Motor. He's on the board. He caught the treasurer in $1 million mistake in terms of carryovers. I don't even understand all this. But they wouldn't even give him the records. And he's a public official. And I, you know, just as a cautionary tale again, he's not on the school board anymore. Because people thought he was too tumultuous,
Yeah.
raising too much hell, right? You don't want people
Rocking the boat.
rock the boat.
Rock in the boat.
Right. But to me, he's exactly who you want on there. This man has a career of accounting. He understood, you know, budget sheets and everything else and how to finance and do everything at a big level, yet he's not on the school board. And part of the reason I think he's not on the school board is that he sued over it to get the records that he needed to do his job. And you know, if people were more aware of exactly what was happening, if it weren't twisted around so much in the news media, we'd understand that guy's a hero. He should definitely be on that school board. He might ought to be superintendent. I don't know. Anyway, this was the one that was about, you know, sometimes what the government's doing is killing us. This was the IEL landfill in Uniontown, and the rubber companies were dumping benzines and all kinds of things in this landfill, millions of gallons for years. And on top of that, the Army dumped off some old fat boys. I don't mean fat people, I mean fat boy bombs from World War II era.
Ooh.
And there was radiological contamination and osteosarcoma, which is a disease you pretty much can only get from osteopathic sarcoma. It only comes from radiation exposure, but people started getting osteopathic sarcoma around this landfill. Anyway, that was a FOIA case where we were trying to get records from the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and Department of Army. And that was we did get a lot of records. We didn't get paid any attorney fees. The litigation went on for 3 years. There's just another old story about it. This was another, I'm sorry, Brian. One of the things that you'll see, and I want you to just be aware of, that's why I have this up here. Residents hired me in this case, this was just a zoning case, but One of the things you gotta watch for in the courts are sort of sham defenses. You'll find that a city sometimes will be sued by somebody, and there's really been an agreement to settle that case. If they're the only two parties, they get that case settled, right? Have you seen any of this? So watch out. If you think the city is not gonna defend in your best interest, get a lawyer and intervene in that case. Again, this isn't something I recommend you do alone, but they will set up cases. We had a case on campaign finances, and the citizens of Akron passed a law to limit how much could be given to their council people, you know. And it was a charter amendment, initiative petition drive. Well, the city went into federal court. They got sued, right, to do away with that law. And the city went into federal court, and they were going to settle and agree that it was unconstitutional. We knew that was coming. Now, I had just gotten my license. I wasn't even licensed in federal court. I hustled. I got my license in federal court 2 weeks later, and I intervened on behalf of the people who had circulated the initiative petition. And then they could no longer settle that case. We ended up losing at district court, but we won at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And it's one of the only decisions in the country that says money is not the mother's milk of politics. Because we hear about money in speech, and it was an interesting case. And then, again, cautionary tale, you know, I get sued occasionally. I got sued for expenses by the city. And then I did run for elections back in 2000 for county executive, lost handily. So, that's me.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you.
Jeff, we have a question.
Yeah.
A quick question. So for the public records request versus, or the FOIA, are there set times once you make those that the records have to be produced to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They have to be produced in a reasonable time. I would say if you've made a request and they haven't responded, I'd give them probably a month.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you could go right in. I mean, if you show up and say, I want to see the records, you could sue immediately if you want, almost immediately if you wanted to. But I generally, most of the time, it's not that urgent, so I recommend that we give them a month, and if they still don't respond, then you go in and sue.
But you're talking about FOIA, right?
I'm talking about Ohio Public Records Act. FOIA has an administrative process. They have 21 days to respond to you. If they go beyond that 21 days, and that may have changed since I last did this, but there is a set amount of time they have to respond. If they don't, you can bring a lawsuit. So FOIA is different. And there's also, you can do administrative appeals within the agencies, depending on the agency that you're suing. And we did go through the administrative appeal process, but again, you don't have to on the federal side. You can go right to court if you want to. But we actually spent on our federal FOIA with the Uniontown dump, we actually spent a year doing appeals in the Department of Army, EPA, Department of Energy. And we had a huge, so we had a huge record of an effort to work with the agencies to get the documents. We ended up getting millions and millions of pages of documents in that case. So,
Thank you.
Wow.
I'll hang out after Brian's done too, if anybody has any questions.
Okay, my presentation is about my efforts to use the Open Meetings Act to root out corruption in Portage County and a couple of the townships down there. I have a oral argument coming up on a case where they decided to strike back at me and wanted to find me as guilty of frivolous conduct or liable for it, whatever, and the intent was that I was going to pay for it. So that's why it's titled Frivolous Sunshine. They want to make sunshine frivolous in Portage County or throughout Ohio. Let's see here. What I'm going to talk about is my favorite judge. I call him Robo Judge, and about the oral argument I have coming up, the history of the case, the errors that we'll be talking about it in the oral argument. And then we get into some other things like how Humpty Dumpty went to court, and you know, Kathleen Clyde, our losing commissioner down there, and what's cooking now. So first we go, oops, page. Here's my favorite judge, railroad judge, Ryan Bolton. Now, he gets that name because he has a tendency to sign closed orders without ever looking at the pleadings or doing any of the other things that judges are supposed to do before they decide that. And he did that.
Brian, sorry to interrupt you. Is this the judge that told them to write write the orders, that he would write it, and then he'd read it and just accept that, so he wouldn't have to write anything?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's a fairly common practice, you know, in common pleas court. So, you know, that in and of itself isn't, you know, wrong. What it is that the judge has to read the pleadings. He has to do his job. He has to hear the case. What happened was he became so frustrated that with me because I was filing all these cases and he could not intimidate me to stop, that he decided that he was just going to get me. So he signed this order on this case, proposed order, where the motion he was granting had never been filed. Now, common pleas courts are what are called courts of record. They're not courts of email or courts of phone calls or anything like that. If it's not on the record, it doesn't exist properly. So here he is with an order on the record, and he could never have seen the motion he was granting. So he signed that order on the 3rd. I filed my appeal on the 4th. Okay. Well, then he went on and wanted to have, you know, do the real number. We're going to make him pay. So you guys bring in your invoices, and I'm going to make him pay the attorney's fees for the other side. You know. Well, when he did that, I started mentioning, well, you know, that motion isn't on record. Okay, so when they realized that, well, they started looking at the record, and then all panic broke out between him and the attorney for the other side. And I thought I was in a Abbott and Costello routine, you know, because he keeps saying to me, he says, well, we could have corrected the record if you hadn't filed your appeal. And I said, the record is correct. There's nothing on the record. But we could have fixed it. The record is correct. And then goes on like, then he finally says, well, I'm looking at this, and the record is about as clear as mud. Okay, so this goes up on appeal, you know. And I'm going up there and I'm arguing this. This is my second oral argument in front of 11th District, okay? So I'm there and they're asking me questions about, well, tell us if you know why we can't consider this. And I said, well, you know, if you look at Rule 5, you know, once it's served, it has to be filed within 3 days. This has never been filed, and it says that if it has not been properly served, which it is, if it's not filed, it's not served, then the court can't consider it, you know? And, you know, they were sort of amazed that they were satisfied with my answer there. And that they said, like, wow, this crazy guy knows something about the rules, or anyhow. So they go on, and the attorney for the other side gets her turn. And there is one judge there, Thomas Wright, and I'm sure there are people in here who know Thomas Wright. So he's very animated when he's out there, you know. And if you are feeding him in the line, he gets, his eyes start getting like that, and his face gets like it. And in the room we were in, the people arguing are right under the judge's noses, you know? So it was like, he was ready to leap out at her and throttle her. And you know, so she would say something like, well, they could have done this, they could have done that. Well, you know, the Court of Appeals isn't a court of could have, you know. They have to review the record as it is, what happened, not what could have happened or what somebody should have done or anything like that. So, you know, he's getting very irritated with this person for all this nonsense. And so she says, well, we don't know what happened to that motion. And I'm sitting there laughing, you know, to myself when she said that. So when it came back to my turn for rebuttal, I come up there and say, well, there's no mystery as to what happened to that motion. I said, it never got filed. You know, a reasonable person would have verified that it got filed. You know, I mean, you just don't, your mother doesn't work at the closed courts. You know, when you take something in to be filed, you got to check to see it did get filed. I knew it was gone, it was not filed. I told them months before that it was not filed, and they just blew me off. Pro se guy, what's he know? So when he was making that argument, why the Judge Wright said, well, it says right here in his response that it wasn't filed, and it wasn't filed. So, you know, did you read his response? So, you know, at the end of that, after I finished my rebuttal, she says, can I respond to that? And Judge Wright says, no, your time is up. And that was the most satisfying thing I ever saw. So you know, in January, why the opinion came out, and they just they said all they could within decorum in that opinion about railroad judges' procedure, you know. And, you know, and the one judge, Diane Grindale, said Ames should have been granted everything. Every motion he filed should have been granted, you know. But that was just a concurring opinion, so it wasn't a majority. Then so it comes back. The railroad judge is devastated, you know. His plan was foiled. This was critical to his plan to defeat me on the other thing, because he was going to nail me. He's frivolous. We're going to ban him from proceeding on any of these other cases, and it all fell apart. So he recused, you know. And then sometime later, at the end of the quarter, he robo-signed 7 more cases, all in the same day, or 5 cases, all on the same day, okay? And then he announced that he was leaving the bench at April 1st. So he's gone, you know. So...
Can I ask a question, Brian?
Yeah.
How are you received? If you're not an attorney, how are you received in the court? I mean, do you...
Initially, he tried to intimidate me, you know. He took me into that conference room, and he says, tells me, you know, you're going to stop doing this, or I'm going to take you out there and hold you for frivolous conduct right now. And, you know, and then he said, why are you doing this? He said, you know, I told him, hey, look, you know, there are a lot of other things I'd love to be doing. I said, I am, you know, an engineer. I had 2 patents granted last year and 1 this year, so there are other things for me to do. And he says to me, well, why are you doing this? I said, because I'm the guy who can. It's something that needs to be done, and I'm the guy that can do it. So, you know, that's my responsibility in the way I think, you know.
Brian, can I say something about that too? I mean, and that is I was there for some of that, because I was on one case, and then he had a pro se case, and he had them both together the one day. You know, I said, you know, he asked, we dealt with the first case, and I said, you know, it's on Brian now, this is his other case. You know, you gotta deal with him.
Yeah.
And there is, for a pro se litigant, I think they are, you know, absolutely treated like crap, okay?
Pro se means non-lawyer.
Yeah, non-lawyer on your own, I'm sorry. But I'm gonna say this, even with lawyers, because there aren't a lot of us doing this. They're like, why are you bringing this case? Where's the money? They wanna know where the money is. What's their, you know, their case is about money and injury. They're not usually about public accountability.
I'm sorry, but what is this case about? I never understood exactly what the beginning of the whole
You just happen to find out this judge was signing entries without reading the
Yeah.
cases.
Well, the case that I had there was, they were holding improper executive sessions. They had secret meetings.
The county commissioner, what city are you?
Portage County.
That's all, I was not really sure what you were suing over, that's all.
They were holding that, they were having secret meetings to impose.
Okay, that's what I needed to
Sales
back.
taxes and, you know, just, everything was being done secretly, okay?
It is.
So,
That Monday.
I, you know, we had the first case that Warner handled for me. I did a pro se case shortly thereafter, okay? And then came this case, this 6-7 case, okay? Now there, they were just going, we're not even gonna give notice of these meetings, we're just gonna do them, you know? And we're gonna talk about stuff that we're not allowed to talk about. So, you know, this was shortly thereafter, okay? So, this case that's on appeal now, that it was about, you know, numerous things. Failure to give notices, inaccurate minutes, improper executive sessions, and having meetings behind locked doors, you know. Now, this case, why the judge recused herself from it, okay? Then they assigned Roe a judge to it to take it. The first thing he did was, you know, he came on board, and the county was 70 days late in answering. The first thing he did was, well, we'll strike his amended complaint, and, you know, you just take all the time you want there, county, and you know. So he did that, and then it went into stall mode, where he would just sit on it and not do anything, not roll on any motions for months and months and months on end. So then I went and did this thing called an action in procedendo, which is where you go into a superior court, like into the Court of Appeals, and you tell them, hey, this guy is taking months and months and months, and this is hurtful to not just me and the public, but to the county itself. So order him to start doing his job. Well, this particular one...
I'm going to interrupt again. I'm going to go a little back and forth with you on this, because, you know, there are some things that are really important here that I want to point out. As a lawyer practicing in the system, it is very dangerous for me to do actions, you know, procedendo actions, okay? Because you're really taking on the judge. And I got to appear before those judges again and again and again and again. It's very difficult to do it. Pro se litigants can do this all day long. Because you got nothing to lose, you don't have to, you're going to see that judge a few times, you're not going to be there every day, year in and year out for a 20 or 30 year career.
That's what a corrupt judge from Bedford Municipal Court told me once, that you can do something about the attorneys, you can't do anything about the process.
So just be, you know, these are important. I'm interrupting you because this is critical. There's things that I can't, I won't say that I haven't considered procedendos when things get delayed, and they do get delayed, but man, it is a last resort for me. But doesn't have to be a last resort for you. The other things that would be out there that would be last resorts are affidavits of bias. You know, if you think the judge is interested in the case or biased against the case, I'm going to give the judge all the deference I can because I'm there all the time. You don't have to give them any deference. Okay? So there are some advantages to being a pro se litigant over a lawyer. You know, I just want to be able to go in and advocate for my clients and do so as well as I can, but I can't get sideways with the judges or I'll lose my ability to do that too. I won't be a good representative for my client.
That is a very good point. I don't have a license that I can suspend. So now this is a case here, the 6-7 case. There was the other case, the big case, the one with over 100 violations on it, and he won, and it was cold. It was slam dunk. The Supreme Court had ruled on the question of law back in 2001. And they just kept doing it. They would not, even after I filed suit, they kept on doing it. It was slam dunk, and he was dead set against me ever winning at it. Anything, or him ever signing any motion that I filed. So when I filed the action in procedendo against him on that case, he went in and said, well, he was busy on this case, and that's why he wasn't working on it. So I filed this one. I filed a procedendo on there to show the court that no, he wasn't very busy. He hadn't done anything. So that went on for a while. That went into mediation in the Supreme Court, okay? And then he would promise them things, and then he wouldn't do them. And so then it would come back to mediation again, and I'd say, there's no reason for me to talk to him anymore. His word is not good. Now imagine an attorney telling the Supreme Court, that isn't going to happen. Well, I can do that. Yeah, here's what I talked about. Then, you know, because he's so frustrated, he comes after me on this case, this other case. It isn't an open meetings Act. But he thought it provided him a good opportunity to get me. And he tried that, and of course that went into the one that I won on appeal, and the Abbott Costello routine and all that stuff. So, and of course that, the attorney for the other side is somebody known to many people here. That was Attorney Nancy Schuster.
Oh, yeah.
So judges are required to be neutral arbiters. They're not supposed to take sides. Okay? In the case that I'm going to be arguing on the 30th, the judge not only became biased, he said, this is going to be my case now, and I'm pursuing my case against you. Okay? So he goes and finds this frivolous conduct that had never been argued by the defendant in the case. And so what he said, it's frivolous. You know, why? Well, you know, I can't say off with his head, so I'm going to say it's frivolous. And he takes this proposed order and just goes through, and before every paragraph where he had in some insult to me or something, you know, derogatory, you know, if this may be difficult for Mr. Ames to understand, but if for anybody that lives on this planet, why? So he does all this, right? But he never bothered to read the law. The law does not allow a judge to just say, well, forget about your rights, Mr. Ames. If you got rights, the Court of Appeals will hear about that, and if they think you got rights, well, they'll send it back down here to another judge. Well, you know, that's like due process out the window, you know? Not even a kangaroo court. We're just going to hang them.
The other thing about what he's saying, and there's a couple of things that can happen. You can get, penalized under what's called Rule 11 for frivolous lawsuits. There's also a vexatious litigator statute. Is
Yeah.
everybody familiar with that? So they will come back. They will come back on you with the vexatious litigator if you're filing a lot of lawsuits. This is where groups come in handy, though, right? Brian, how many lawsuits have you filed?
13.
13, okay. So the sheer numbers of that by a pro se person, the judges don't understand this, and there is some risk of somebody trying to get you named a vexatious litigator. There are vexatious litigators out there, but Brian isn't one of them. But if you have a group, you could take the various issues and split them up individually. You understand? So you have 13 people file these 13 cases. You're not vexatious if it's not repetitious for one. That's one of the elements.
That is where Diane Grantel did me a huge favor in the current opinion. She said, this is not frivolous. And so the standard for frivolous conduct is that it's something that no reasonable attorney would do. Okay, once the appeals court judge says, yeah, this is not frivolous, that standard is pretty well met, because she's got to be a reasonable attorney. So I owe her a lot of thanks for, she just did what was right. She didn't really do me a favor, but she did what was right. So in this case now, this was his second try at frivolous conduct and sanctions and stuff. However, whenever he asked the county for how much money they were out, they said, we don't know, zero. So there's all this rigmarole where he was saying like, well, this is not a final appealable order. You cannot appeal it. I appealed it anyhow. It's like there's a 30-day clock starts ticking. Okay. Now, if I would have took his word for it, my time to appeal would have run out before. So I'd say, I'm not letting you decide whether it's appealable. I'll let them decide, and they decided that it was appealable. So that's where we got. And then, so in this case, the first assignment of error we're going to talk about is that he did not follow any procedure. There is no, he cannot bring his own argument into court. The attorney for the other side has to do that. So he just out of the blue, in his judgment entry, he put all this frivolous stuff. And then after he put it in there, he changed his mind about it. And then he said, well, I was wrong in my order. I should have put this in. But he didn't really change the order. He just said, well, I really think this is different. So this is what is called a case of first impression. The courts have never heard a case where frivolous conduct was imposed in an Open Meetings Act case. So that means there's no case law for them to rely on. They have to figure it out on their own. They can't look anywhere else. So that's what they call a case of first impression. Now there's a statute out there that governs frivolous conduct, and when the legislature makes a statute that says murder is murder, You know, the Open Meetings Act can't say, well, murder is not murder in here if you're doing it in an open meeting, you know. So the intent of the legislature is clear when they created a whole statute for frivolous conduct, that it applies to all frivolous conduct, okay? So he goes in and takes these 3 words at that time and assumes that those 3 words mean no due process, we ignore this statute, and they think, I just get to zap him. So there are no allegations, no party presented any evidence, there was no hearing. So now, here are the things he says are frivolous. I said that the Board of Commissioners have to give notice of the special meetings. He said, no, that's frivolous. But he never even read the stuff. He just took this word file and placed these insults in it, you know, in every place, and never even read the pleadings or knew what they were about. So that was what happened there. The second area is when you take these proposed orders and you just sign them, there's a chance that they might have factual errors in them, okay? And that's what what happened. This particular assistant prosecutor is very error prone. So he argued and put in the order that this was a regular meeting. The meeting minutes said it was a special meeting. It was on Tuesday. The regular meetings were always on Thursday. There was one at 8:30. The regular meetings were always at 9:30. And they were on Thursday, not on Tuesday. There was even one on Monday. Okay. So when I did this, I picked out the ones that had factual errors in them, and I included those few in my second assignment of error, knowing that the same prosecutor that made the errors in there, he would copy and paste that same stuff into his brief on appeal, and surely he did. So here he is now. He's got to argue three assignments of error. First one, he never argued in the court below, so he's not allowed to argue it there. You know? Right. Second one, he's got to convince him that Monday is Thursday, Tuesday is Thursday, 8:30 is 9:30. This is all the same. So here's the greatest one now. He's arguing that a motion to disqualify, because I filed a motion to disqualify on that case. I filed two actually. I filed one first because the judge assigned to the case had been in one of the meetings and was in them and familiar with what happened. So they're not allowed to hear cases where they have personal knowledge of the fact. So she recused, okay? Well, he says that my motion to disqualify deprived her of all rights to hear the case. Now, there is something else called an affidavit of disqualification, which Warner mentioned, and that goes to the Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice decides that. And the law says that they cannot do anything until she has decided, okay? So he's trying to equate this a motion, and the only person that can decide a motion in that court is the judge. So it's kind of a less drastic thing, you know, just a friendly reminder, you know, it's not as obvious as the affidavit of disqualification. So he's trying to say that that motion to disqualify is effectively an affidavit of disqualification. You know, this Chief Justice of the Supreme Court does not monitor motions to disqualify. So, but there were two of them. he only argues that for one of them, because the second one was for Judge Reinbold. And he doesn't want that one in. So now, he's up there arguing to 3 judges that Ames can pull out a sheet of paper and file it, and you guys are zapped. You guys can't do, you're powerless now. And I don't see them buying that story. If I think they do, I'll have 3 in my pocket. So, you know, it's going to be brutal for him, you know, in my view. So, here we come to Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty went to court. Humpty Dumpty says, when I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less, okay? So now I have these cases where they clearly went into executive sessions, okay? But they're arguing that, well, these aren't executive sessions, they're something else, okay? And there was a case where it was Cincinnati something or other, but there was a case where the Court of Appeals refers to an executive session as a so-called executive session, and then says, well, it isn't really a meeting, so the Open Meetings Act doesn't apply, and they can do whatever they want, and there's a so-called executive session. Completely ignoring the fact that they used the word executive sessions to get people out of the room, you know? And so this is a huge deception that they want to be able to say executive session whenever you're in the room, and once you're out and somebody brings them to court, well, it wasn't an executive session really, it was something else. So I came up with this thing, a warning that I'm going to say that these bodies that are engaging in that practice put this up outside their meeting room so that when people go in, they know that, well, you know, maybe it's an executive session, maybe it's a bullshit session, or maybe it's a Scrabble game.
One of the things about this violation of the executive session, and this goes to the removal of a mayor, and you know, we were talking about other people that can be removed. If they do this, and you find in the court of law, you have a ruling that they've done an illegal meeting, the next time they do that illegal meeting, they can be removed. Okay, so there is some accountability. It would probably be a multi-year process, but having a court rule that they've had an illegal executive session, it'll start to put them on their toes. They can be removed if they have a second one in violation of which again is an injunction on that first case.
And here's another one. They're arguing that, well, the minutes don't have to show what the motion was to go into executive session. And so the minutes only have to have detail enough for you to understand the decisions that they made, right? Gee, a motion and vote is pretty much a decision to me. I'm not sure where they do. And then they say, well, it doesn't. The meetings don't have to show what happened in the executive session, but the motion and vote don't happen in the executive session. They happen before it. So you know, these are the kinds of games they're playing. And one of the things I'm doing, you know, in this last brief I filed, it was like 32 pages, and I'm taking on all these things so that we have the case law, you know, and we can overturn these things where they said you do that. These are so-called executive sessions. They aren't really executive. So whenever somebody else comes along, all they have to do is say, it's already decided, see here, you know. Here's my yesterday's efforts, and I went in to vote, okay, and was in the same buildings as the commissioner's office. So after I finished the voting, well, I went upstairs to the commissioner's meeting, and I go in, I sit down, and I happen to notice these business cards out there. So I picked up all 4 that were on the table. Now, if you look at them, there's 3 commissioners there, and there's 1 clerk. Okay? 2 commissioners, I have a number on there that I can contact them in case of emergency. On the third one, there's no number that I can contact her on, even if there isn't an emergency. Her direct line in, and I know what the number is. She doesn't put it on her card. So I got these cards, and I saw they were having a public comment section, and so I signed up for it. And when it came time for me to speak, well, I said, you know, I'm looking at these cards, and it doesn't seem like there's a uniform commitment to open meetings among our commissioners here, you know. I said, when I look at these 2 cards, I could see where I could contact them if there was an emergency. And they have to be able to respond to emergencies requiring immediate official action. Suppose some critical department head was no longer going to be available for some reason or not, or any reason at all, they would have to take immediate action, you know, to make sure that that function kept on being performed. So, if I cannot reach, it takes 2 now to be there, okay? So if I reach 1, okay, got 1, okay, on the first try, now I have, normally I would have 2 more chances, right? But because this card has no contact information on it, I only have 1 call. So my chance of successfully resolving that emergency have been reduced by 50%. So, you know, I had not mentioned any names at that time, up to that time, and this one commissioner, Kathleen Clyde, I'm sure you know the name, you know, started saying, well, you're talking about my card, and I don't have to put my personal phone number on it. And I said, well, that's correct. However, I said, that does not protect you from the consequences. You know, you might be found guilty or liable for nonfeasance if you cannot perform your job because of something you omitted to do, you know. So she started getting all upset, and I said, if you don't want to put your cell phone number on there, have the county issue you a phone. They've done that for other people. Put that one on there. Well, that isn't the point. The point is she doesn't want to talk to anybody. She lost an election, and by virtue of losing that election, she became our commissioner. So, you know, she never showed any interest in a county office before, but when she lost, she was out of work, so the party appointed her into that spot so that she could have something to keep her alive until the next election she wants to run for. So that's where that is. So, you know, you know, this is just me on the spur of the moment seeing something and rattling some cages, you know. When they saw me coming in there, the clerk went in and warned everybody that Ames is in here. We don't know what he's here for. So I'm having some effect. So
how did you learn all of this, Brian? Did you just pick this up from Warner, or did you do an awful lot
well,
of reading?
I, you know, with all due humility, I guess, you know, I've got exceptional reading comprehension, and so that's what I rely on. I can learn this stuff faster than they can. And so it doesn't matter where we start out, I will end up ahead of them.
Well, I mean, and that's really true. I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, the damn public officials have no idea what the rules are, a lot of them, on executive sessions or public records or anything. I mean, we're teaching them all the time. They don't know it. They get training every year, but they don't really know it.
Well, many of them don't take the Open Meetings Act training.
Correct.
They'll send
That's
somebody
right.
else who isn't.
Absolutely
Mandated
correct.
in Ohio law, I don't know that, I don't know what's going on with all that.
Yeah.
But they're supposed to know.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be trained.
In fact, there was a public information request made about all the officials, elected officials, including trustees, mayors, whatever, who are actually engaged in the elected officials' public training. And this entire database of all the people in the state of Ohio.
88 counties.
88 counties. And out of all of them, in Geauga County, there were 5 who completed the training. And we know, we are auburntownship.org. Some of you know us already. We're Tom and Diane Jones. We've been at this since 2011, when we knocked heads with Auburn Township. And that's an entirely different story. But it was a life changer, and we will outlive them. We absolutely will outlive them. And the trick is to keep going, because they always want to get you back.
Yeah.
And you just keep going, and you don't take it personally, because if you take it personally, you're not gonna make it. And you were absolutely correct when you say you have these little ups and downs, these little highs, these little adrenaline highs that you're entitled to have for what, maybe an evening? And then yes, you go back to the routine and the discipline, and you keep going, no matter what it is, what the problems are at that particular juncture of your life. You keep going, because if you don't, you lose ground, you don't bounce back. So, yeah.
I would echo that, and I say from Lobbyists for Citizens, what I feel is there is maybe it's an internal pressure to keep publishing. Because
Absolutely.
people, once they start coming to your website, they're expecting you to have something, and it's not just once a week. You better be publishing all the time.
Yeah.
And it's something, and what I find is that I do have other sources within the community that are emailing me something. Brian, you know about this, or you should look into this. So we're always getting fed information by sources that require us to do the corroboration and the research. We just don't publish. Somebody tells us something and then we go to print with that. We don't do that. We have to do the
You have to verify.
You know, I want to say something on this, because I had an acquaintance of mine run for a political office, and he was trying to put stuff up, records, direct records. They fed him false records, and he got sued for defamation. So you really do need to, that's why the public records requests are so important, because you know that came from the city. This is their record. They can't contradict it. But you need to be careful, because they will feed a false record to you. That will happen. I mean, it just will. If they're coming after you, they'll feed you some false information.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that.
It's a setup. And the
Yeah.
first time you bite, you go
You're
go
done.
into it,
Yep.
then they have grounds for getting you, that you have no veracity, you have no credibility, even though they lie or are inaccurate every day of their lives. The first time you go down to that level, then you lose all credibility. It is a scholarly pursuit. It is for academics, but there's a great deal of satisfaction in doing it and keeping up the standard that you expect of yourself. So,
I'm going to mention a controversial figure, but Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
Absolutely.
The key to his effort, it has to have real information, that he's verified the origins from, and I'm sure they have fed him a lot of falsehoods that they've tried to get him to publish. You know, he hasn't published anything false. So he understood that, and I mean, whatever you think of him, he understood that issue. He wants the raw document to get out there. And, you know, that is, you know, we need to make sure we've got raw, real documents.
Absolutely.
And he's managed to do it, you're managing to do it, that's great.
He's arrested now.
Well, of course, because they attack him personally, which they will do.
Yeah.
Anybody who's affected, they're going to attack him personally. He's the leader of WikiLeaks or whatever, so bang, take him down. Yeah, of course he's going to get
That's
got a
why you
couple
gotta have
more
other
minutes,
some
right?
other people
Yeah,
that
we gotta
take
get
it
out of
out.
here.
I'm just gonna wrap up quickly.
Tell us about Schuster. There's a connection here with Geauga
Oh,
County.
yes, is
Oh,
there?
yeah, we need to hear.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Where that is now is, we ousted the chairman, okay, that was telling us that we had to accept Schuster as our attorney even if he had never met with the committee. Now, there's a rule that an attorney who represents an organization has to meet with that organization, and they have to get an idea of what the entire organization wants, not just one person. So Schuster violated that rule. She really doesn't represent the defendant is in that case, or respondent. So we ousted Jennings, okay? And then the chair, the new chair, sent a letter to Schuster saying, you never represented us, and we want you to butt out, essentially. That's what she said. Well, then she came back and she says, well, you can't fire me. You have to have this meeting and talk this all over. We didn't do that to hire, so that never happened. And so now she's got this thing that really amounts to a complaint. It's a contract dispute. She's saying that you don't have the authority to discharge me, and that's a contract dispute. And she's trying to bring it in as a motion in this case. And I'm saying, like, no, if you got a beef with the committee, you got to go file a complaint against the committee, you know. So it makes it rather interesting. Now, I've got a new judge on this case, the fourth judge. I'm on my fourth judge now. I keep wearing them out. He's going to, he strikes me as a reasonable person. You know, I've seen some other cases he's done, and he's taken over some messes and cleaned them up. So I'm anxious to see what he's going to do with her.
Is there a time limitation wherein that judge will either agree with your motion or come up with a different judgment?
Generally, they use a guideline of 120 days.
Oh.
If they go down, he's a lot, you know, what I'm seeing is he's not going to run 120 days. You know, I was impressed with him when I saw him, you know what I mean? And what I've seen him do in other cases. I don't expect, you know, the last filing was due today, and that. So I expect he's going to have an order pretty shortly.
Okay.
And that'll wrap up then.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Right now, I have filed with Geauga County. I have a writ of mandamus against the prosecutor because 6 times last year he either didn't respond or sent me on a wild goose chase or only responded in part. I did hire an attorney. What they did is, although they have 5 civil attorneys in their office, they hired an expensive outside law firm to represent them and have now asked for a jury trial. And all I was asking for was information on a part-time investigator who works for his office.
That's really interesting because they generally don't have juries on them.
Oh, yeah. Well, that'll probably work to my advantage. But my question is, as soon as I win that case, and I will, I'm gonna file a record request on his, FOJ fund to get all the records. But I don't know what exactly I should ask for. I mean, I don't know if I should ask for credit card bills, I don't know if I should ask for receipts, if I should ask for copies of checks. I don't know what all to ask for.
I have never done anything in that area. I couldn't tell you, I couldn't really answer.
I'm not sure. What's the FOJ fund?
The furtherance of justice, and the prosecutor and the sheriff each have their own fund, which is
Public money?
equivalent to half their pay.
Public money that they have? They just
Yeah,
can spend.
and they can do whatever they want with it. And the reason I'm interested is they had, with this embezzlement case, there were 2 people from Texas that were involved in it. And the prosecutor and an investigator went to Texas to do an interview. And I was told that he didn't like that he was gonna have to switch planes. And so they upgraded his ticket to one way and it cost $3,000. Now, I'm very interested in getting all the information around that
I'll
trip.
tell you sort of what's gonna happen. I mean, go ahead, just make your request.
Yeah,
They're gonna come back and tell you that it's an overbroad request.
well, that's what they did with what they tried to do with the last one, but it's not.
And that's such crap too. We didn't used to have that problem. It's something that the courts have been grafted onto this. You should be able to get every public record in the city
Yeah.
limits, for example.
They wouldn't give me timesheets.
Start just take periods of time and ask for a particular record within that period of time. You have full access to their accounting records.
Yeah.
You know, the auditors, have the auditors been in? Get the auditors records.
See, I tried
for
the
a
auditors
given- for a
already,
given
and they
year.
said I'd have to get it from the
Ask-
prosecutor.
Yeah, and when if you know that they have a credit card, ask for the credit card bills.
Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, if you don't know, I mean, you
Ask for it anyway.
start somewhere and just keep following up.
Okay.
You know, of course they're gonna say it's overbroad and they're gonna object and, you know, but if you,
I'm gonna limit to a 2-year period.
yeah, okay, play their game, narrow it down till you start getting a response.
Okay.
And then start expanding
Oh,
that.
yeah, I can narrow it down to about a 4-month
But
period.
this is a problem with the law. I mean, the courts have narrowed and narrowed and narrowed what we can ask for and how we can ask for it. You ought to be able to ask for all of the expenses by a city for a given year, for example. Why not? They have our accounting package, they can print it out or publish it, right? We need our state legislatures, you know, you're the judge